Clearly, he was overwhelmed with emotion, and you'll see this many times in victim impact statements. They are read by a third party, maybe his attorney there, because it's just sometimes too difficult for that person to speak out, and it is an impossible situation. Oh my gosh. Joseph, we're going back, we're listening to this. I have to ask you, the autopsy report was released yesterday, and there's a lot to discuss. What are some of the things that you've learned after reviewing that report?
Well, I think one of the most striking things for me out of, all of the data that's contained in there is I think I'd have to go to Bella's. That's the oldest child. When we consider it, the child has got a ruptured or, as they say, a lacerated frenulum, which is the little connective tissue between your gum and your upper lip and also lower as well. Little abraded areas in here. And she's bitten her tongue. And this gives us an indication that she was smothered, not suffocated, not strangled, but smothered. And in my opinion, Daddy, if I can use that term for this man, placed his hand over her little mouth and nose as she's struggling to survive. And she fought back. That's why all of this is torn to shreds. And I think that that paints a real picture of the horror and the terror that he inflicted on his family. And it's just, sometimes you think you've plumbed the depths of human depravity. And then after seeing this case and having covered it since it started, I've been waiting for this autopsy report, and it's unbelievable.
We've been waiting for the report. We just hate what we're reading. We wish this wasn't the case. We're going to take a quick break, Joseph. When we come back, we have a lot more to discuss in the Chris Watts sentencing. So everybody stay tuned here on Law and Crime. Okay, so those are the parents of Christopher Watts providing a statement to the court. Joseph, when you're listening to this, one of the points that struck me is really, how could someone do this? How could someone who is loved by these three women and do this? So explain this to me, because I don't have an answer.
I have no idea, Jesse. I've scratched my head over this thing many, many times, when the details began to come out. And I'm thinking, you've been entrusted by, these peripheral family members to take care of your family. It was, the dad's, Shanann's father's statement.
Yeah. Joseph, it's actually impossible to describe. Yeah. And you know what? Let's take a quick break. We'll discuss it a little bit more on the upside, because really there's a lot to talk about. We'll be right back. And it's amazing to see on both sides how unbelievably heart-wrenching this is. And watching Chris Watts showing little to no emotion throughout this, maybe trying to suppress it, I've never seen anything like this. Back here with Joseph Scott Morgan to talk more about it. Joseph, I want to focus now on the autopsy report with Shanann Watts. What did you discover in particular when that report was released about the way that she died?
Relative to Shanann, what we did find is, if folks at home will kind of find the center right here, where your thyroid cartilage is in this area, your trachea, she had a focal area of hemorrhage and what's referred to as a strap muscle. It's kind of a muscle that runs diagonally through here on the right aspect, to a lesser degree on the left side, but very focalized in this area, which gives us an indication that she was probably what we refer to as C-clamped or throttled. C-clamp is a single hand, throttled or both hands. Some people have proposed that she had been killed while she was asleep. I'm unclear. And there's not much of a struggle. She doesn't have defensive injuries and all that sort of thing. But what is very important here is that this cartilage in here has a potential to fracture. There is no fracturing that took place. This area that we examined very closely at autopsy, it just displays this kind of overlying hemorrhage. So my thought is that sufficient amount of force was applied by Chris Watts to her throat in a very short order. Some people have talked about it took 2 to 3 minutes for her to die. I don't know about that. I think that she probably passed out relatively quickly. He would have had to have continued to apply pressure for a little while in order to achieve anoxia, and then finally she would have succumbed from lack of oxygen supply to the brain. There's no particular hemorrhages either. I think I've seen a lot of chatter on the internet about this. That is the soft areas in the eye. You get these little pinprick hemorrhages. You guys probably hear about that on TV and that sort of thing. And that is something that we look for. But it's not always indicative. People think that that's just a hard and fast rule that you're going to have these. That's not always the case, though. Needless to say, it was a brutal way to die. She had an awareness that something was wrong. And the fact that I'm kind of struck by this, thinking about the kids here. Mm-hmm. She's a pregnant lady. She's got 2 other babies in the house. I call them babies. And she's not fighting. I want to know what the circumstances were, where these little girls were during all of this. She's dressed for bed. When you look at the autopsy report, she's wearing a T-shirt, a pair of underwear. It's not like she got off of the plane in Denver, came home, and they got into a fight after, and she's still in a business suit or something.
Yeah.
She's prepared for bed.
I want to explore that as well, what the proximity with the girls, and we're going to get more into that in a minute. And we can't forget the fact that Cindy and Ronnie Watts, the parents of Chris Watts, they have to accept the fact that their son did what you just described, Joseph. And we saw Cindy Watts speak out in the court. A statement was read on behalf of Ronnie Watts, again, the father of Christopher Watts. I want to play that right now. It's very complicated for the family of Christopher Watts, and just heartbreaking any which way you put it. Yesterday was a very emotional day in court, and we are recapping it right now. Back to you, Joseph. One of the things that we had discussed as we were waiting for the sentencing hearing was whether or not we would hear any statement on the part of Christopher Watts. Would he say anything to the court? Would he try to provide some sort of explanation for why this happened? And the absence of anything like that, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, let me paint a picture for you, Jesse. These 2 little girls were found in raw petroleum, dumped into these vats. One girl, to the point, Bella, where she's got superficial scratches on her buttock, where she was jammed through this portal. A tuft of hair is caught in this thing. The wife is buried in this sandy-like composition soil, decomposing. We talk about the body being bloated and this sort of thing. He's the only person that witnessed this, Jesse. He's the only person that can kind of tie this back. But yet, he sits there quietly. Even BTK, and let's bring him up, even BTK was compelled to allocute. And I know that was in Kansas. But for him to sit there and not give us a view, not offer up something to these survivors as to what happened. He has one currency left, and that is the currency of mercy. And he chose not to use it, Jesse. In this idea about talking, you're saying that you're guilty. In this idea of putting forth these ideas or putting forth this statement relative to what happened on that night, he could have at least begun to help these families heal, so that they're not just going to be kind of bumping around in the dark for the rest of their life, thinking about what happened to my precious family that's now gone and this guy's sitting in a cage. And it brings me back. I really wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, counsel has advised him not to say anything, that maybe that's one last bargaining chip he can use to leverage himself in some way. But just looking at him and seeing these past reactions that we've seen, this narcissistic, self-centered nonsense, it wouldn't surprise me if he's holding it back on purpose. And I think that it's one of the cruelest things to be witness to.
Well, we're asking to get into the mind of Chris Watts, and I'm not sure that's a place anyone wants to be, because trying to understand his behavior and his actions makes absolutely no sense. How does he do that? Porch interview, saying that he doesn't know what happened to his family, nice little smile on his face, seems all nice and concerned. And then really, in reality, he is the person, that man right there, responsible for what happened to his whole family. So trying to understand why he does certain things and why he doesn't, and trying to see if he shows emotion, it's going to be impossible to do. Let's focus, though, back on the girls, because trying to understand how this killing occurred, when you read the autopsy report, you spoke a little bit about Shanann Watts maybe was in bed and going to, about to go to sleep. What did we learn about the girls and the way that they were dressed, and any indication about the time frame of those killings?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question here. I searched the literature on my end to see if there's any possible research that had been done relative to bodies submerged in raw petroleum. Leave it to me to look up for something like that, right?
Yeah, well, your search history is probably a little interesting, Joseph.
I couldn't find anything, and I'm really wondering. Because my big question all along has been what we refer to as PMI, which is postmortem interval. I want to know how long it has been, and there are too many variables involved in this with a body that is submerged or floating in raw petroleum. Remember, this was back in August in east central Colorado. Heat and environment plays it. I don't know if it remained cool in there. They did talk about there was significant changes to particularly Cece, the youngest one. That was mentioned over and over again. And I'm not going to go into all of the graphic details for folks at home. You can read it for yourself. But it would give us an indication that she was subject to a lot of heat, environmental heat in this environment. And so I can't peg down the time, and that's what really haunts me, because I'm trying to figure this out. It's very convoluted. And the big question I've always had about all of this, was he in the house with his children, deceased the entire weekend prior to his wife coming home? And if that was the case, why wasn't there a huge physical fight? Because the first thing
Joseph, we're still trying to get answers after this. And as you said, the fact that he didn't provide a statement to the court, we're still left with more questions. And unfortunately, that's just the situation. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to hear from the district attorney, a statement from the district attorney, Michael Rourke. We'll be right back. Yeah, these were his daughters, and it's pretty unbelievable to think about what he did to them. Joseph, let's talk about something. One of the recurring themes we talked about a little bit at the top of the program, I know our time together is coming to an end. So the idea of him trying to cover this up, right? So he gives the porch interview. We all know about that porch interview. But physically trying to get rid of the bodies, he dumps it at his work site, and then the cameras catch him. So really, did he expect not to be caught? I mean, you've seen a lot of crime scenes before.
I can only assume that at the end of the day, that's what he's thinking. I'm going to get away from with this, and also the vastness of this location where he works, Jesse. This is a huge plot of land, very isolated. These tanks are really big, and I'm assuming that he just thought that the bodies would simply just kind of disappear beneath this murky, inky blackness in the tank, and he would never be found out. It wasn't very well thought out. And also, if you look at Shanann's burial, it's very superficial. It's not very deep. It wasn't thought out very well. And the world that we live in now, you can be pinged on your cell phone. They can catch you on CCTV. There's an awareness, at least at a digital level, of where you are pretty much at all times. So I can't imagine that he put a lot of thought into this. The DA talked about how it wasn't a frenzied killing. I agree. It seemed rather controlled. I think that he had thought about that. But that's the rub when it comes to all of these that I've seen over the years. Now that you've killed somebody, what are you going to do with their bodies? And so that's something that's a big driver, because people, they have that, oh no, kind of moment, like, how am I going to deal with this? Those of us that work in the morgue and places like that, it's kind of passé for us to look at a body. We know where the body goes, but just the everyday person that's out there, it's a big leap to take.
It really is. Joseph, listen, thanks for coming on. I know you have a lot of hits today. You're a very busy man after what we heard from yesterday, so thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks to everybody in the audience, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, Joseph, to you and your family. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, clearly there is a lot more to discuss. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime.